Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the shortened versions of Lo and Behold. Still haven't quite come up with a name for that yet. But today we're going to be covering the NBA Finals matchup, which starts later today. The Spurs versus Knicks. And this is a matchup where, like, looking at it, like, my first instinct was like, yeah, of course the Spurs are going to win this one. But then, like, looking at it a little deeper, I'm like, I like the Knicks a lot more than I thought I did. Going back and watching film from throughout the playoffs and even earlier throughout the season, I like them a lot more now than I initially thought they did, or initially thought I did. They are, especially in the playoffs, their defense has really stepped up, and a big part of that is Karl Anthony Towns standing his ground a little bit and not just kind of being a bit of a pushover at times. He's being a lot stronger in the post. He's played much better defense this postseason, and I think that has been enough to help elevate them. Then also just their sets have worked extremely well. But then again, like looking at the Spurs match up very well against really any opponent because the defense should work in most situations. However, the one thing that beats Wemby is heavy motion, five out. And the Knicks have the ability to do that where they're able to have a ton of ball screens and play five out at the same time. And that will limit Wemby's impact defensively if they're hitting shots. Because what the Spurs are going to do from the very beginning of this series is instead of putting Wemby on Karl Anthony Towns, where he's going to have to play out up on the three point arc and play away from the basket, they're going to put him on Josh Hart. And Josh Hart was a 40% 3-point shooter in the regular season this year on roughly 3 attempts per game, but his volume has gone up in the playoffs and his efficiency has plummeted. He is only shooting 30% here in the postseason, and it's not, and it's been really streaky. He's had games where it's fallen really well. He's had games where just he's not able to hit the side of a barn. So that's going to be really the big X factor for the Knicks if they're going to win this series is whether or not Josh Hart is hitting his shots, hitting his jumpers, because that's going to be the Wemby matchup. If Josh Hart's hitting his jumpers, then Wemby's not going to be able to fade off of him as much and go double Towns because what they're going to try and get Towns on Fox, and Karl Anthony Towns is not Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren, when he wasn't able to back down the smaller defenders on the Spurs because most of them were still stronger than Holmgren except for Fox. Fox is the only player that was the only player on the floor in the entire Western Conference Finals that was lighter than Chet Holmgren, and Chet still did not try to back down Fox in the post because that's not his game. But Karl Anthony Towns is a lot stronger than Chet. So he's able to back down the smaller defenders a lot easier. So if Hart is able to force Wemby to play further out onto the perimeter by hitting his 3-point shots, that'll open up the post game for Karl Anthony Towns because they don't want Wemby on Towns. And then when Towns isn't in the game and it's Mitchell Robinson, Wemby will go on to Mitchell Robinson. But again, that's still that's still a better look for the Knicks than a lot of people initially look at because another way that teams have beaten Wemby is by using big physical centers. That's another thing Wemby's kind of struggled with at times because Mitchell Robinson is a much bigger body than anybody Wemby's run into so far in the postseason either. And Mitchell Robinson can give him hard screens and can be a rim runner for Brunson. So Wemby's not really able to commit to either one because if Wemby stops the drive off that big strong screen, then they're able to give it to Robinson for for an easy lob look. But if Wemby plays off, what they did in the regular season is Mitchell Robinson's hit him with like a Gortat screen, which allows Brunson to get on the drive without having to worry as much about Wemby's shot blocking, because Wemby again struggles sometimes against physicality. But it's a 7 game series, and Wemby has shown the ability to adjust to most styles of play that teams have thrown at him, because they tried that on the Thunder with Hartenstein, and Wemby adjusted. And they tried several things against him. Alex Caruso, he started off the series really hot. He was shooting at a Steph Curry caliber level, excuse me, uh, at the beginning of this Western Conference Finals, and the Spurs just kind of kept with it and were like, "You're not going to keep this up," and that bet worked out. And Caruso went ice cold for the last few games of the series, which allowed the Spurs to win. So, looking at that matchup against the Knicks, that's going to be the key thing for the Knicks to beat the Spurs. It, to me, at least, is Josh Hart hitting his jumpers, because he's going to get some of the best looks of his life against this Wemby matchup, because they want to use Wemby as that free floating center as much as humanly possible. So they are willing to live with Josh Hart taking the wide open corner threes. So the absolute key thing to winning this series for the Knicks is him hitting those, and that's far and away the most important thing. And then second after that is getting Wemby involved in ball action when Mitchell Robinson's on the floor. And I think the Knicks understand that, because that's exactly what they did earlier in the season. They played when there were some sets they had where they had all five of their players outside the arc. They had Josh Hart at the corner, and everybody else was above the top of the key and running three different screens with Brunson, different rim runners, try to get different matchups. They were trying to get Wemby involved and away from Hart, and leaving Hart literally wide open, nobody within 10 feet of him for three in the corner. That's what they did earlier in the season at home, in their matchup in New York. So I'd imagine there's some sets similar to that throughout the series, where they try and get Wemby involved closer to the top of the key, get him away from the basket while still having his man in the corner. Um, I'd imagine Mike Brown has a lot of sets that are kind of similar to that, and he's drawing up a lot of plays that will get Mitchell Robinson involved at the top of the key as a screener, where he's a threat as a rim runner, and get Wemby involved, trying to stop the drive, and trying to make it so he has to cover multiple players, because as great as Wemby is defensively, covering multiple guys is still extremely difficult, even even with how huge he is in the paint and how much area he's able to cover. Covering two players by himself is still a mismatch on him. And I think that's going to be what the Knicks try to do, and the Spurs will have a counter for that. I'm not sure exactly what they'll do to counter that. My guess is they'll pull Champagne in, or they'll use some weird matchups, because they'll have probably they had Stephon Castle on Karl Anthony Towns earlier this season, and that worked. But if the Knicks continue to hit jumpers the way they have, and Josh Hart has one of those series where he's just absolutely unconscious from three, the Knicks should win that series. But if Josh Hart's struggling to hit threes and the Spurs win that gamble of leaving Josh Hart wide open for three, then they win it. I think it comes down to really that one key matchup of Josh Hart on Victor Wembanyama, and whether or not he's able to punish the Spurs for taking that gamble and leaving him wide open from three. And I think that will be the key to this series. I don't think obviously everything else matters, but I don't think anything else will sway that series as much as that one key matchup, because the Spurs match up very well against everything else the Knicks are trying to do. And I, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I think because I'm at my 10-minute mark, and thank you for joining. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.